Welcome back to the Ross Report. We have on the line with us Blue Rolfes. Blue is Communications Director with the Diocese.
Oh, thank you, Carol. It's great to be here.
Well, thanks for calling in. You have some good information, I hope, for us?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I noticed that you had said several times throughout the day that you had a call into the bishop, but you hadn't expected to hear back from him. And I've checked all of my records, and I don't have a request to speak to the bishop from you, nor does the bishop's secretary. So I was just wondering who you had talked to, because the bishop is very conscientious about returning calls, and he would definitely have spoken to you.
I called and left a message for you. I figured you're the communications person, so I left a message on your voicemail. In fact, I tried more than once.
I've never received any messages, so we do apologize for that, because the bishop would have been glad to visit with you.
Yeah, in fact, I did. I said I would love to interview the bishop on this issue, because I know that there are many people getting very anxious about the list, that we're anxious to hear from the bishop. Many people are very anxious to hear from the bishop.
Okay. Well, you and I had run into each other, in fact, on Monday night, and
right.
You hadn't given any indication that this was going to be covered 2 days later on your show. I would have been, glad to provide some information for you at that time as well.
Well, I have no idea what happened, but I did get your voicemail, and the first time it disconnected me. The second time I called back, and it did take my message, I thought.
Okay. Well, we'll move on from that. One of the things that we did want to point out is, there's a lot of conflation about what happened back in the 1970s and 1980s in terms of sexual abuse cases, as well as priests being transferred from diocese to diocese, that are being conflated with what's happening in current time. And it's just important to us that everyone understands that those are two separate issues, and that we are doing our best to deal with both of them in as timely a manner as possible. In terms of the list that was released by KATC, the bishop has repeatedly, as well as the diocese itself, has repeatedly said we are in the process of reviewing 100 years of priest personnel records, of confidential priest personnel records, to determine exactly which priests should be on a list of those credibly accused. And it's a laborious process. It's not simply sitting down with Google and searching public records and going to courthouses. It's a much more laborious, involved, highly legal process of poring over literally 101 years of church personnel records and history, both diocesan priests as well as priests that have served here within the Diocese of Lafayette, who are actually members of orders such as the Jesuits or the Franciscans or the Society of the Divine Word, or any of the other priests that have faithfully served in this diocese over the past century.
How many people are working on this?
It's an entirely layperson review committee. That was very important to us. Also wanted to refute the point that you had mentioned earlier, that the diocese had brought in an outside firm to investigate names, and that is not correct. This is an entirely layperson review board. It's professional people from throughout the Diocese of Lafayette who have volunteered their time to serve on this committee, to literally spend hours every single day locked up in a room poring over these extensive records in order to make absolutely sure that any allegations that are leveled are credible, and any priest that has a single credible allegation that has been proven to be credible against him has been removed from ministry. But during Bishop Desautel's tenure here of a little over 2 years, I think approximately 2.5 years, during that time he has removed 4 priests because of allegations that have been received by the diocese after he repeatedly urged anyone with information of past instances of abuse to please come forward and to report them.
So the volunteers are all lay people, and they're not associated with any firm. They're just an ad hoc group of volunteers?
Exactly, and they are all professionals. Their names will not be made public, but you would recognize the names on the list if they were to be made public. They're all dedicated civic minded individuals who are well known for their civic and activities here in the diocese, both within the church as well as in the community at large. And we owe a tremendous debt to them for what they have done over the past 6 months in terms of combing through these extensive records, some of which are handwritten. Obviously predating computers and in some cases practically even typewriters. A lot of those records were written in registers by hand a century ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been a quite time-consuming process.
Understood. When did the process begin?
Approximately 6 months ago, when all of the bishops of the dioceses of Louisiana met to discuss the situation, and they all decided at that time that they would release lists within their own individual diocese. The Archdiocese of New Orleans was able to release their list more quickly because they had more resources at their disposal than we did. We also are one of the oldest dioceses in the state, so we have a century of records to come through, whereas other dioceses like Houma-Thibodeau or even Lake Charles would have many fewer years to have to look through. We have been very straightforward in this process from the beginning, and one of the things that we have simply asked for is time to complete the process. That's all we've asked for. As recently as 2 days ago, we made public the fact that we are only a couple of weeks away from releasing the list. The process is just about complete. What they're doing now is just doing a final go-through to make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted, so to speak, because these are lives at stake here.
Well, yes, of course.
These are lives not only of priests and not only of victims, but the ripple effect from all of these cases that has touched so many people throughout our community, and it's that important.
It is
and
very
that's
important.
Why it's taking a long time, because it's such an important process.
Blue, I'm so glad you called. Would you mind taking a phone? We have some phone calls coming in. Would you mind taking a call? We don't have a lot of time, but anyway.
No, that'd be fine.
Well, I think they just went away. No problem.
Okay, sorry about that.
So you.
And I apologize for the technical glitch at the beginning. My phone accidentally dropped the call. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So you're saying in a couple of weeks we can.
Yes,
we can
exactly.
look forward to this. All right. Now, how detailed will the reports be? Will they outline exactly what the charges are, the time frame, who the victim was, et cetera? Or will you protect the identity of the victim? How exactly is this going to come out?
Well, to be honest with you, one of the ways that you'll know about how protected and confidential this fact-finding process has been is I can't answer that question because I don't have that information, because I've had no input whatsoever in researching the list or putting it together. No Chancery employees, no diocesan employees were involved at all. We wanted to avoid even the perception that there would be any influence over the process. We wanted to make sure that the lay committee was protected, given confidentiality, and given the time to do this very important job. And that's why, like we said, it's so important, and there are so many lives in the balance, and it has to be done properly, and it's not a process that can be rushed. We know that everyone is very anxious to see the list. We, too, are anxious to get the list out.
And the question is, so many of the other dioceses have already released the list. I understand maybe they are not as careful as you all, but it just you understand, it does raise that question. Well, why are the other dioceses have they released it and we haven't, and Lafayette
once
has?
Again, to go back, if you look at the history of the Catholic Church in the state of Louisiana and the different civil parishes of Louisiana, we were carved out of the Archdiocese of New Orleans 101 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have all of those records to go back to, including prior to 1918 when the Diocese of Lafayette was created, but our geographical region was still under the Archdiocese of New Orleans. We're even looking at those records as well. There are not as many available to us as we would like, simply because of the passage of time.
Right. I am so glad. I'm so glad you called, and I'm so sorry that my call to you was dropped, because when I saw you Monday evening, I had no idea I was going to do that show with Jim. That hadn't really occurred to me at the time. There were some other issues that came up that caused me to push up that timetable to interview him. But I did call, and unfortunately, as I said, the first time I got disconnected. The second time I called back, and I went through to your voicemail and left that message, and I still hold that invitation open. I hope the bishop will come on and talk about these issues and get it out to the community. I think that will be one good thing to start the healing.
Well, I think he would welcome that opportunity because he's been so very open. One thing, if I could add very quickly, Carol, I know you have to wrap up.
Yeah, you hear that music. Go ahead.
I sure do. If you could direct everybody to the Diocese of Lafayette webpage.
Okay.
There's a set of frequently asked questions that will answer.
Okay, what's that website? It's
DIOLAF.org.
Okay, DIOLAF. All right, thank you, Blue. I really appreciate you calling in. Glad to get everything clarified. Thanks again.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. Yes, and standing invitation to the bishop. Thank you.